Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of New York Yankees History and Heroes. I'm Lynn, and with me are Ciarra and Spencer.
Good
So,
evening.
Spencer, how are you feeling today? And are you ready to talk some
Oh, I'm,
historical
I'm ready to
stuff?
talk, and I'm going to do something. I know you hate me for doing this, but I think you'll appreciate it because it's relative to the world that we live in. We got a lot to talk about today. We're going to talk about Jason Giambi. We're going to talk about the 50th anniversary of the Yankees' second year of residency in Shea Stadium, and we're going to also talk about the 2003 season. Before we get to that, though, a major news event happened. It was the passing of Pope Francis. Although Pope Francis didn't do this, it does echo how back in 1979, Pope John Paul visited and held Mass in Yankee Stadium about 2 months after Thurman Munson died in his plane crash. I don't want to get totally into it, but I just thought it was relevant. I thought I'd bring it up. Lynn, you are the senior member of this group. Do you have any recollection of that Mass in Yankee Stadium?
Not only do I have memory of the Mass in Yankee Stadium, but I was in 1979. I was in high school, and
Mm-hmm.
I was in the high school band, and it was a Catholic high school.
Yeah.
So, um, the very first time that the Pope Mobile was seen in public was in Madison Square Garden when the Pope had an event there,
Right.
a reception there, and there were some high school bands that were invited to perform for the Pope, and our high school band, Cardinal Spelman High School, was one of them.
Do you know anybody who went to the Mass at Yankee Stadium? Did
But
anybody see it? You could do it?
no, but
I'm
let
sorry.
me just
I'm sorry.
finish my story.
Forgive
Okay.
me. Sorry about that.
Okay. And so for whatever reason, our band teacher chose the theme from Superman, which was the blockbuster hit that summer.
Yeah.
And as the Pope's riding around Madison Square Garden in the Pope Mobile, that's what we're playing. And I knew enough to be mortified.
Yeah.
But so I got to be in his presence. I got to be among the first to see this Pope Mobile.
Remarkable.
But no, I was not in attendance at the Mass at the stadium.
Yeah.
But I also would not have seen him as up close and personal as I would have as I did at Madison Square Garden. But yes, that's another tie-in to the stadiums of New York City, right? So
History
yeah,
is in our title. We're talking about history, and it's not all baseball, right?
yep, exactly. And I really want to believe that Pope Francis, he was a big soccer fan. But over there they call it football. I have to believe that he would have been a Yankee fan.
Tremendous
Um,
loss.
Yeah. So, and before we get started, let me just take a little attendance here because we have our studies in the chat. So, Stephen B, good to see you, Lori. So nice to see you, and my sister Karen is here. Karen has contributed to the content of today's episode, and we'll get to that later on. Hey, numbers guy, good to see you. And Lori says that you're a natural, Spencer.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
There in the chat. So let's get right to why we are starting with the 2 years of residency of the Yankees in Shea Stadium. You wanted to kick us off with that, Spencer?
This is the 50th anniversary that the Yankees spent their second year at Shea Stadium. I think in this day and age, a lot of Yankee fans would find it very interesting that the Mets served as landlord to the New York Yankees back in the early 70s, right around the time that George Steinbrenner had just purchased the team. The Yankees were still finding their way in the American League. I think they were good teams, and you're going to tell us about that, Lynn. Before we get into that, Ciarra, I have a question for you, okay? Because relevant to our topic tonight is this year, on the 50th anniversary of that residency, the Tampa Rays are taking residency at George Steinbrenner Field. Put yourself in the shoes of a Tampa Rays fan. Put yourself in the shoes of a Tampa Ray. What do you think it's like for them to be playing outside of their home park and playing, not only playing in the Yankees stadium, but the Yankees are now their landlord.
Yeah, so I'll talk about it from a fan's perspective first, and then a player's perspective. Without sounding rude, I didn't know there was Tampa Bay fans, to be completely honest, because if you watch Yankees games when they go to Tampa or Clearwater or wherever, typically the Rays only sell out when the Yankees are in town anyway. So it's typically a home game for the Yankees regardless. But that has more to do with how the franchises ran and things like that. So as far as the players go, it's got to be weird because you're not playing in your home stadium. You're playing in a smaller park. When the Yankees came to town, it's essentially a home game for them, but they're the away team. So it's super weird. And you know what? Shout out to Stanton for being super classy and leaving a baseball bat behind. For the gentleman who took his locker. I just feel like Stanton is one of the most classy people in baseball, and that deserves a shout out. But it's got to be weird. Like, I would be weirded out by it.
Yeah.
Lynn, I want you to take us in a time machine. The Yankees already played the 1974 season in Shea Stadium. First of all, what were fans talking about this situation with the Yankees in Shea? What was the talk? What did you talk about? Your sister? What did you hear?
So going back that far, we're talking 50 years. It was a kinder, gentler time for baseball. There was still such a thing as a polite society back then.
Mm-hmm.
And the rivalry and the interborough trash talking that we know in our day and age was pretty much non-existent then. Even the Mayor's Trophy game, which is what it was called back in the day, was very gentlemanly and very sportsmanlike, and all the golf claps. So there was really none of that tension that we thrive on, right, and feed off of each other.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and Karen reminded me of this, we really didn't interact with each other at all, basically, other than when we faced each other those two years. Because,
so there was like no ribbing between Mets fans and Yankees fans.
Exactly, because the stadium was just Yankee fans. It was while the Mets were away, and vice versa. Okay. So unfortunately, they'll never know what they missed, the fans of that time.
You mentioned that your father would take you You mentioned that your father would take you and the family to baseball games. Now I'm trying to put myself in your shoes.
Yeah.
I'm thinking if my dad is taking me to a Yankees game, but it's not at Yankee Stadium, I'm probably going to pick up on certain landmarks that stand out to me. They seem alien to the normal route. What did you notice, on the route to Shea Stadium compared to Yankee Stadium as you were even going to a Yankee game in Shea?
So being as young as I was, for me, and then I'll speak from Karen's perspective, for me, it was like, oh, wait a minute. I thought we were going to a baseball game. Why are we going to Uncle Johnny's? Because my uncle lived in Flushing. And so, to me, a baseball game meant Yankee Stadium. And so, but really, I would say to your question, that it's what we didn't see as we approached the stadium. Because Shea was really in the middle of nowhere. It was situated right off the Van Wyck, and it was borderline on the World's Fairgrounds.
Right.
And so, in fact, Karen mentioned that from your seats, if you're facing the outfield, you could see Terrace on the Park, which is and the Biosphere as well. So it was really an island. And so there wasn't so much of a feeling as we approached in the way that it is when we were going to the stadium. Well, I mean, they're both the stadium, but you all know what I mean.
Sure.
And so, but in terms of what it was like to be at Shea for a Yankees game, and sometimes during that era we were there as for a Mets game, because the reason my father was able to take us to all these games was the company he worked for had corporate seats, and his boss would toss my dad some tickets every now, like, the clients aren't interested,
Right.
whatever.
Well, you mentioned that, a difference to you in traveling, just in the route to Shea, was what it was that you didn't see along the route. What didn't you see as you were going to Shea Stadium when you would go to a game? Any one or two things that like stand out.
Okay, so what I didn't see as we got closer to the stadium is the crowds walking towards the field.
Okay.
In Yankee Stadium, it's very much like people getting off the subway, people walking across the Harlem River Bridge to come over, because it was walking distance. For those of you that don't know this, the Polo Grounds were like less than a mile away from Yankee Stadium, just across the river from each other. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people from Upper Manhattan would walk over to the game. You didn't see that at all at Shea, because the way Shea was situated is the parking lot surrounded the stadium. So people literally, certainly people got off the 7 train, and would have walked. But, Karen's memory was, basically you got out of your car and whatever gate was, near your car, you just walked in there and that was it. Yeah. Car to stadium.
Yeah.
And so that made the vibe completely different, because, and this part I do remember as young as I was, Yankee Stadium, first of all, the parking lots were all over the place. There was this tunnel that connected some of the parking lots to the stadium on the other side, where the famous bat was at the other end. And there was always vendors everywhere. The minute you got out of the car, you smelled the hot dogs. You heard the guy with the saxophone in the tunnel, like playing, and it was reverberating everywhere, and people tossing him change. And Karen saying something about the hot dog vendors and the t-shirt and like just all the swag. All the vendors were out there. And like I said about the bat, people were meeting each other there to go in together.
Yeah, there's a famous book by George Falkowski. He wrote a book called Meet Me at the Bat on that very topic. I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to ask Ciarra a question.
Sure.
Ciarra, have you ever gone to Yankee Stadium with a paper ticket? You're like the millennial in this group. I mean, have you gone into a game with a paper ticket?
I don't think I've gone anywhere in life with a paper ticket, like a baseball game, a football game, an amusement park. Everything is on my phone.
Of course, we used to have paper tickets. And one thing that I talked about with Lynn, before this podcast, is even just having the ticket in my hand in 1975. You go into a Yankees game and you look down at that ticket and it says venue, Shea Stadium. I mean, what would be your thought if you saw a different stadium for your New York Yankees? Imagine if the Yankees had to play in, I don't know, Minute Maid Park, or if they played in Fenway Park. I mean, what would you think about that?
I would be so grossed out, to be completely honest, because that sounds like torture. It sounds like hell. I couldn't imagine going to Boston and being, oh, this is our home game, but it's our rival and they hate us. Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lynn, you're at a game at Yankee Stadium, okay?
Yep.
You've gone through the ticket check-in, okay? I don't know the entry is what I mean. Okay.
Yeah, there were turnstiles back then.
Turnstiles. So you're in the stadium, you're in the concourse. What do you see in the concourse? Does it look like that Mets have done everything to make it seem like it's a Yankees game? Like, is there a Yankee souvenir shop? Maybe Yankee food? Does it feel like you're at home? Does it feel like the Yankees are there? Because I could also see a situation where you walk in and you see like Mets souvenirs and Mets sayings. Like, tell us, what are we seeing when we walk into a game in 1975?
In Shea Stadium, it was clearly like the Mets' home. There are photos that I saw from back then where in the outfield, the center field billboard had the Mets and Yankees logos both on them.
Did Bob Shepard, was he the PA announcer in Shea?
Karen. Put it in the chat. Do you know if Bob Shepard was the voice of God at Shea? I think God only lived in the Bronx, but
That would be, I mean, it would be so alien to, like, again, be in Shea Stadium and to hear Bob Shepard, it's now coming to bat, number 2, Bobby Mercer, the center fielder, number 2. I mean, that would just, again, I'd feel like I was in another world.
Karen saying yes, Bob Shepard was at Yankee Stadium, was at
Oh,
Shea.
wow. Well, and I hope she can, like, just share her thoughts on that, on like it must have just felt out of body, like you're in somebody else's clothes.
Right. I would imagine that felt weird, for sure. And the Mets had their own organist, so I don't know if the same is true about the organist. Yeah. But that's the other thing that was different is the organ was so integral to the Yankee Stadium experience always.
Yeah.
And particularly in that era before we had to leave. Or find ourselves under rubble. So, but at Shea, it wasn't like that. It was like there was a time for a little blip of music, and so like the fanfare, the crowd, riling up, getting the crowd like excited, was sort of absent in comparison.
Yeah.
So. And also the technology, just in fairness to Shea, is, the technology is not, where it, is now. So there wasn't, I do remember little cartoons playing. I remember like, in modern day, okay, I'm really calling it modern day, but
my memories of Shea Stadium, I forgive me for cutting you off, but I really want to talk about this. Going to Shea Stadium, I remember parking, behind the center field. The thing that stood out to me is that it was an open stadium.
Yep.
So when you got out of your car, you could look in and you would see the orange seats. You would see that it was circular in shape. That definitely took my attention. Center field, the back of center field on the outside of the stadium, it was a chain link fence.
Yes.
There was really no major security, to keep vandals out of there. So anybody who wanted to sneak in, you really didn't have much of an IQ to get in there. But I do remember the vastness of the parking lot. I do remember like the orange seats, and I do remember it had kind of a, I hate to say it, and I hate to sound disparaging, but there was kind of a cookie cutter nature to the outfield wall. I remember it was like it had this sharp angle going from right field to left field. That was something that always stood out to me. It was this blue wall, and it had these very nondescript numbers, showing the depth, from home plate.
Yes, exactly. It was almost as if they had run out of money, with those blue and orange tiles that they had to have on the outside, because it very much looked like a drive-in movie theater screen. It was just like flat white wall, and John the Beagle Dad is saying that he remembers that the entryway ramps were ramps to the seats, and Karen is reminding us that there were no bleachers at Shea Stadium.
Right.
So and the fact that it was open, the way you described, Spencer. The original plan was for Shea Stadium to be a bowl. But it didn't get completed that way. So it was this odd, like, am I a horseshoe? Am I, so you didn't get that same echo effect that you got at Shea Stadium.
Yeah.
So,
I found a few options. There's Gaelic Park, 4.6 miles
Echo, stop.
Somebody driving?
Echo,
Alexa.
Alexa thinks she's part of the show.
Lynn, the Yankees, they were not in first place at that point, but they were still pretty competitive. The baseball was decent. Would you say? Do you think, like, when you think of those Yankees from 74 and 75, do you think, good team, good memories? They weren't terrible. How would you characterize them? You and Karen, how would you guys characterize
them? Some of the heroes of my childhood were playing in the 74, 75 seasons.
Yeah.
You have players like Chambliss, Mercer, Munson, Roy White. You think of every old timer game from when we got older, but they were definitely a good competitive team even then.
Did they have events like Old Timers Day at Shea Stadium? I know I didn't ask you that before.
Not only did they have Old Timers Day at Shea Stadium, but fun fact, Joe DiMaggio played his last Old Timers Day at Shea Stadium. Old Timers Day 1975 was Joe DiMaggio's last.
That's remarkable. That's good. This is good information, Lynn. This is gold. This is gold. This is what we want.
I mean, this is the history. This is the stuff we geek out about, right? But yeah, a lot of those. Lou Piniella, my sweet Lou. I have thanks to an ex-boyfriend, every Lou Piniella card ever produced from his very first rookie year on through to when he was a manager and beyond, and autographs and signatures. I still have my Lou Piniella T-shirt from that day. Right. He was in the lineup as well, so it really evokes and that was really the dawn of my fandom, was the mid 70s.
Now, just to double check from what you were saying before, there was, the fans were sort of kind to each other. In other words, Mets fans didn't tease Yankees fans. Oh, you guys don't have your own home. You got to play in our home. You guys should wear Mets uniforms. No interaction like that.
Nothing that Karen would recall. Okay. I don't know if any of it had to do with we tended to be in somewhat pretty good seats since they were for clients. But no, everything was polite. There was no cursing in the parking lot either. No one was like, I got to get out first, or everyone took their turn. And and Karen saying that there really weren't Mets fans at the Yankee games. The Mets were really considered the new kids on the block in New York City in general, right? They were really only about 12 years into their existence. Which is, like a year in normal times, right? So, especially in a city like New York. So, and what Karen mentioned, which I think is a really good point, is, it was very hard for the fact that there weren't bleachers really meant that your quote typical fan really couldn't afford to go to games during those 2 years because you had to buy the more expensive seats to see the game. So going to Shea was like as if you were a season ticket holder kind of price point to get in.
To put it in perspective, though, on that issue, I would have thought that like a quote unquote expensive seat would be like $20. I mean, it's not like today. I'm just out of curiosity. Maybe Karen can give us some insight on that if you can.
Yeah. Well, we never knew the price of the seats. And Karen might remember. But
my dad, he would take me to like 3 games a season. About how many games would you go a season, and how many games did you go to in 1974, 1975?
So Karen's saying $20 back in the 70s was a lot of money to some people, right? Yeah. Obviously. Karen, how many times would you say we went to Shea to see a Yankee game? To me, it was we're going to a baseball game. Yay.
If you like, I'll share a little aside with you. So in my involuntary retirement, every now and then I will watch rerun episodes of Sanford and Son, which I didn't know filmed around 1973. And there was this one episode where Fred Sanford is having his taxes done, and his accountant comes in and he says, okay, you can get the $5 service, or you can get the $10 service. And Fred says, what's the $10 service? The $10 service is where, you get a higher refund because we don't tell everything on your taxes. But, like $5 for an accountant. My old accountant, she wasn't too expensive. It was like $100, to do the payroll, So, I mean.
Right.
So,
I
can take that.
I do remember, and this goes back to my uncle living out in Flushing. I do remember their neighbor's kid went to a Yankee game, and we were over the house that day when the kid came back home from the Mets game. His parents were, with us, and my uncle in the apartment. The father asked, "So where's my change? I gave you $5."
Yeah.
And he didn't. He said, "I spent it all." And I remember this poor kid getting smacked to death.
Yeah.
So that kind of pretty much tells you.
There's a great line in the movie Saturday Night Fever. Again, forgive me for listen, but disclaimer, Lynn, I'm going to be cutting you off like a pair of scissors tonight. So just forgive me. I don't mean to, but
no,
look, it's my
enthusiasm. We
won't
understand.
allow me. But there's a great line in the movie Saturday Night Fever. John Travolta is working at the hardware store. His boss finally gives him a raise. He gives him a raise to $4. He goes home and his father's out of work, and his father says, "Why didn't you tell us that you got a raise at the hardware store?" And John Travolta was sheepish about it. He said, "I knew you'd shit on it." "Well, how much are you getting?" his father asked. Travolta says, "He's giving me $4." His father says, "$4? You know what $4 does? $4 doesn't even buy you $3." All right, so that's 1970s economics.
Yeah, they just don't make sitcoms like that. So a few other really cool tidbits before we leave the Shea topic. So the last game that the Yankees played at Shea during that residency was September 28th, 1975 against the Orioles.
Yeah.
It was a doubleheader. The Orioles took the first one, the Yankees took the second. And in the lineup were, get this, I forgot to mention Sandy Alomar. Remember Sandy Alomar?
Yeah.
So I had forgotten.
That's Rojas's father.
Yep, exactly. And so they split that series. The last series.
Forgive me, no, I'm wrong about that. That's not his fault. I'm thinking of Felipe Alou. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's all right. So they split their last series in the stadium at Shea. Another tidbit is that Shea didn't just host the Yankees. That in 1975 they hosted all four major teams in the New York area on consecutive Sundays in 1975.
Yeah.
So obviously that's the Mets, Yankees, Jets, and Giants.
Yeah.
So imagine that you're changing the field from a football field to a baseball field once a week. So that grounds crew, I hope they were paid well even back then. And the last thing I want to mention is about the apple. So that apple that pops up and down when there's a home run at Shea. Karen corrected me that there was an apple then. It just was smaller and less amped up than the one in Citi Field now. But it was a home run apple. It popped out of a magic hat.
Yeah.
And when it was first installed in 1960, it would say "The magic is back," which was the Mets slogan back then when they first came into being. And that original apple is now, I'll never see it because it's at Citi Field.
Did the Yankees sit in the first base dugout or the third base dugout?
That I don't know, and I didn't ask Karen. Okay. Karen, you're on deck. So I don't know.
Is there a game or a moment at Shea Stadium that year that you remember that stands out to you? Do you remember something in the crowd, the crowd reacting to anything like that?
All I remember, and maybe Spencer, you could help me with this, or someone in the chat. I remember I talked about how the tech was so different back then, but I do remember a cartoon playing on the billboard, and it was that cartoon Felix the Cat, and the organist out of character played the Felix the Cat, the wonderful, wonderful cat. Yeah. And it was whenever he came to bat, that was his walk-up song, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's my only unrelated memory there. Karen
I
doesn't
know we have to
remember
move.
the
Yeah,
dugouts. Yeah.
I know we have to move on. Can you just tell us what it was like watching a Yankees game on WPIX in 1975, and maybe also watching a sports report? Did you ever hear like sports reporters or any reporters make any comments about the Yankees being in Shea? Anything at all? A sarcastic remark, a serious remark, anything?
I'm going to turn to the chat on that.
Hmm.
PIX was Yankees, WOR was the Mets, so that was
Yeah.
channel 11 and channel 9. All I remember from PIX is during commercial breaks there was a guy in the studio that would come out like a gong show contestant, and he would do this thing with his fingers, da 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 da, and and do these finger tricks that were really corny. So, but no, I don't remember any sarcasm from the PIX studio.
Yeah.
But you had Rizzuto in the booth,
Yeah.
and so there was always a wisecracker too there.
Yeah. Well, Ciarra, like when you watch a Yankees game today, and the Yankees are playing in their stadium, I don't know about you, but me, like there are just things that I'm used to. Like sometimes I notice the guy who produced Rush's records. He's a guy with a big beard, long beard, and hair. Like sometimes I see that guy sitting at a Yankee game, but it's like you're accustomed to the legend seats. Or when the Yankees played in the old Yankee Stadium, I remember like to the right of your screen, sometimes you could see the no Peppers games allowed. Uh, like if I were to tune into a Yankees game and they're playing at Shea Stadium, I'd be looking at it like, that's interesting, like that's kind of an interesting finding there. What do you think if you were watching the Yankees, play a year in another team's stadium? What kind of things would you be looking for?
So for me, it would be more audio. So even when you watch a Yankee game at home, you can hear the bleacher creatures from the very beginning. Like they're very loud with that roll call. And I can imagine if we were playing a year somewhere else that wouldn't be there, because all those people aren't necessarily going to travel to other stadiums. Ticket prices and transportation prices, especially in the city, are going to make a difference. So that would be one thing. And I'm just curious too, if, the Yankees were playing in a different stadium for a full year, and I'm here in Chicago, so I'm watching it through MLB TV. If I would get the option of still having Michael Kay and David Cone, or if I would get stuck with someone else.
Yeah.
That would probably bother me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you think you would feel if you knew that the Yankees weren't playing in Yankee Stadium for an extended period of time? Before you answer, like right now, it looks like the A's are going to be not even in a regular stadium for 2 more seasons beyond this one. So it'll be 3 seasons total. Mm-hmm. The Rays, maybe they'll get back to their stadium. I think if it was me, and if I was in 1975, I'd start to get a little anxious. I would even start to get tired of this whole Shea Stadium residency. It would start to lean on me. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, the A's fans deserve so much better than what that ownership has given them. They should still be in Oakland. They should have tried harder. They should have just did a better job. And those loyal fans, I feel terrible for them. Yeah. But with that being said, I think I would be anxious because you don't know. There's like that uncertainty. Yeah. You can never get comfortable. Imagine the players, they can never get comfortable because that's not their home. Yeah. It's their temporary home. And it's like as soon as you start to get comfortable, you're yanked up and you have to move. So it would be weird. I guess the best way I could think about it is, being in Chicago, imagining if the Cubs had to come from the north side of Chicago and play on the south side. It would be. It wouldn't look right. It wouldn't fit right. It's 2 different atmospheres. So the whole thing would throw me off.
Yeah. Let's say if in today's world, the Yankees are using Citi Field, but now they can really make Citi Field look like a Yankees home. Let's say if they sold a fashion hat, a Yankees fashion hat, but it had some Mets colors in it, blue and orange. Would you buy it? You probably wouldn't buy it, but what would your reaction be if you saw fans wearing any type of merchandise echoing Mets colors?
So I'm probably the wrong person to ask because I live by I will let fans fan how they want to fan, right?
That's okay. Yeah, yeah.
If you want the name on the back of the jersey because it's cheaper, you go ahead and do that. It doesn't affect me. If you want to spend your money on Mets colors and a Yankee hat, it's your money. Like, you know what I mean? That doesn't affect me. However, I do know that those old school Yankees run deep in their veins fans are not going to be happy about it, and you are probably going to get bullied, whether it's online or in person. Not that I agree with that, but it would probably gross some people out. And but honestly, I think it would sell. I mean, look at the Dodgers, right? They can sell their gear in any stadium, away, home, does not matter. Look at the Tokyo series with the Dodgers and the Cubs. It was split gear. I saw people buy it that weren't Dodgers or Cubs fans. So I think it just everything has their audience, and I think it would sell regardless.
I would be happy to anger any Yankee fans who would look at my cap collection and see all the different color variants of the Yankees caps that I have. If it makes fans angry, good. That makes me happy. That makes me feel good. Radical change to the system. Disrupt the natural order. That's what we're talking about. Lynn, any final thoughts on the 1975 season? The Yankees finished the year in Baltimore, and they're about to go into the now, I'm going to say it like this, air quotes, renovated Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
Because in my opinion, it was really a new stadium. I mean, there was, except for the facade, if you want to make an issue of, okay, they kept the facade in the outfield. All right, I'll give you that. But by and large, it was a brand new stadium.
It was. And let's also remember, or heretofore be informed that it wasn't the last time that the Yankees had to take up residence in Shea. Yeah. They also, some years later, a beam collapsed in, I believe it was left field. New, and so for a short time, not the whole season, but for a short time, they had to vacate the premises, and
so they needed to temporarily borrow the stadium. Yeah, exactly.
So, but yeah, I think let's get into this millennium, and and talk about the 2003 ALCS.
I do want to thank you for taking us into that time machine, Lynn and Karen, and for everybody in the chat who was a Yankees fan at that time. I think it's something that just doesn't get talked about enough, and I think it's something that Yankees fans who really want to know Yankees history, this is what we want to know. The Yankees keep it kind of a mystery, so
yes,
I applaud you very much. Thank you, and thank both of you for your thoughts on this pressing issue.
Thanks for taking us back there, Spencer. And fans have really short-term memories, and that's another reason why we started this show, because things like this, whether you thought it would interest you or not, most real fans will say, "Oh, hey, that's interesting. I didn't know that I liked history. This is kind of interesting." And oh wow, there was a whole world before the dynasty of the mid-90s into the beginning of the new millennium. And so, but here we are going to 2003 to the ALCS championship series between our once and perhaps future rivals, the Red Sox.
Well, I think I just want to back up just a little bit. We're going to get to 2003 because germane to that is our spotlight player tonight, Jason Giambi. We're going to get to it, I promise, because we got to start with the signing of Jason Giambi, which happened in 2002.
Go for it.
What did you think of Jason Giambi? When he was with the Oakland A's.
I mean, I was a little kid. I just thought he was cool.
Yeah.
I was like 7, 8 years old when we signed him. So leading into that, I just thought he was a cool guy who can hit the ball. Yeah. And I mean, I was like, okay, cool.
No, Ciarra, that's great. I can relate to that. Like, for me, like when I was, in my elementary school days, Reggie Jackson. Reggie Jackson was the guy for me. Reggie was my favorite player. And of course, I saw him with the eyes of an elementary student, as you see Jason Giambi. Tell me about how you viewed him as an elementary student.
I mean, you know, when I got a little bit older, the things about like the golden thong and like all that stuff came out. But when I was just a little kid, he was just a guy that could hit home runs and play first base. And to me, as a kid, anyone who signed with the Yankees, I was a fan of, because I also, you know, I didn't have a computer. I didn't, you know, have the knowledge I have now where I can see players past and things that they've done previously. For me, it was just the Yankees are signing somebody. They're playing for my team. I'm going to root for them every game, no matter what. So that's all it was for me. It was just pure love of my team and anyone they brought in.
So how did you feel when the Yankees signed Jason Giambi as a free agent? At that age, did you hear the news of, even before the season ended, how it was almost automatic that Jason Giambi was going to sign with the Yankees? Did you hear the news of when he actually did sign with the Yankees? Did you catch the press conference? If you did, what was your feelings as a child?
Yeah, so I kind of fed off of the adults around me, and my grandfather is a huge Yankees fan, and he was very excited. So because he was excited, I was excited. I didn't fully understand it at the time, but you know, to him, you know, they were bringing in some help. And they pulled the trigger, right? Because back then George did what George had to do. He didn't waste any time. It's very different than what we see with Hal. So I was ready for the next season. I was ready to go. And unfortunately, it was a long off season and we didn't get to see Jason for a few months. But when that season came back around, I was very excited to see what he can do for us. Yeah.
Did you feel any resentment that he was essentially replacing Tino Martinez?
No, because I was so young that Tino didn't have that impact on me like he would have on, you know, you guys. So no.
Yeah. Lynn, he signed with the Yankees a 7-year contract. But I don't know, what was the amount? $70-80 million he signed?
I don't know it off the top of my head, but 770 sounds about right. I think I read that number is resonating with me from the reading I did. Didn't catch it in my notes though. John
like
the Beagle Dad. John the Beagle Dad is saying that he was annoyed that Tino had to leave. And that's exactly what you would expect. It would be like a healthy Rizzo being, you know, replaced in his prime. Not that Tino was in his prime; he was on his way, you know, to be retiring anyway. But
we all know
it was always hard to let them go.
We all know economics. We all know that, you know, $1 back in 2003 is not what it's worth in 2025. We all know that. But still, it's remarkable to look at his contract. And I don't think his contract, his AAV, was, you know, even $10 million a year. Jason Giambi, if he existed in this decade, I mean, he could command, you know, a $200 million contract, even despite, you know, what they're saying about first baseman. That's one thing that stands out to me, is just comparatively, his contract was kind of cheap. What do you think?
So real quick, he made $120 million for his 7-year contract. So that's about 70
a year, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So there's two ways I'm going to answer that question. The first is knowing the aftermath, right? Yeah. So we now know what his, you know, how much per year he got. But his career stats tell a different story. And I think a lot of that has to do about the journey along the way. But, you know, his overall average, his career average at the end was 277. But go ahead, Spencer.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, before he came, like, I remember a lot of people were really jazzed up about getting Jason Giambi. Like, we couldn't wait. Like, yes, Tino Martinez had to go, but we knew who Jason Giambi was. He was an all-star. He was a first base. He was an MVP. He was a guy that hit home runs. He was muscular. You know, like, this is when baseball players were, of course, we understand, you know, the impact of steroids. I don't want to get into that, you know, but, you know, he was a big guy. He was confident. He had attitude. And, before he joined the Yankees, of course, remember he had that goatee and that mustache. We always remember that he had a T-shirt that famously said, hit it hard like an all-star, pound it like a porn star. Like this guy was crazy. But then like what struck me is at the press conference, how he cleaned his goatee off, his mustache off. He seemed like a completely different person. I almost feel like in a way that sort of foreshadowed, the loss of his or the diminishment of his abilities, because you're expecting the guy to hit like 30, 40 home runs a year. You're expecting him to be the guy in key situations. But to what you're saying, Lynn, about stats, he wasn't really like living up to it. And I remember his first year in Pinstripes, at least in the very beginning, it was a struggle for him.
Right. And then he hit his stride, right? At the end of it all, he had 440 career home runs. And so that's not too shabby. So it sort of makes you wonder if things didn't go the way they went towards the end.
Yeah.
If it would have been even higher than that, and would he have been on the ballot for the Hall of Fame?
Well, one of his great moments with the Yankees, one of his best moments, we all know it, was the grand slam in the rain. Now, I remember this well because I was at that game. That game was cap night. Everybody got a cap kind of like this one that I'm wearing tonight. See how it says Cannon on the back side of it? I don't know if you can see that or not. But anyway, we'd get like, cheap Yankee hats.
Right.
It was a game against the Twins. A lot of runs scored in that game. Bernie Williams hit 2 home runs in that game, including a game-tying home run in the 9th inning. As the game went on, as it went into the 10th inning, the 11th inning, the 12th inning, the crowd started clearing out. Then when the Twins took the lead, they scored 3 runs. I think it was the 12th or the 13th inning. I can't remember specifically, but it was a long game. And at that point, like the stadium started clearing out even more. And so when the Yankees came up, even I felt like getting out of there. I thought there's no way they're going to come back. But they eventually loaded the bases, and Giambi eventually came up. And I swear it's almost biblical. Like right before the pitch where he hit the home run, it started pouring. I mean, it was really, really bad. And I was sitting there thinking, I can't believe they're still playing the game. I can't believe they're not taking the players off the field at this point. And there was another part of me just thinking, just swing and miss and get it over this so I can get out of this freaking rain and get home already. It's a late night. I want to go home. But man, when he hit that home run, it felt like there was a full stadium there. It was just absolutely electric. You could not believe what we had just seen. And you almost felt like we knew that we had a story that was going to be told, for the ages. It was a story for the ages. Yeah, the game was in May. Yeah, the game was a regular season game. But something that also proves that the regular season matters. That moment mattered, and it was a great moment. I feel so lucky to have been in the stadium in the presence of that game. I feel so fortunate.
Yeah. You know what else that was about? That was a foreshadowing of what Giambi would do again in Game 7 of that 2003 ALCS, where he hit not 1 but 2 home runs in that game against Martinez.
Yes, exactly.
Also, so the way we say, were it not for Stanton, how far would we even have gone in the postseason?
One more thing about Giambi is in that 2002 season, one thing that always stood out to me was when he came to the Yankees. The Yankees had already done their 90s thing, the World Series. Okay. And they had defeated the Oakland A's in the ALDS heartbreakingly 2 years in a row. 2001 especially, that was really difficult. The A's looked so dominant. And again, I was at those ALDS games. Mark Mulder, I forgot who the other guy was that pitched. Their ace. But the Yankees looked completely outmatched. And in Game 3 of that 2001 ALDS, that was, of course, the Jeter flip game. But they won that game 1-0. They barely won it. And then, of course, they creamed Corey Lytle in Game 4, and they came home and they defeated the A's soundly in Game 5. That was a great game to be at. I mean, let me tell you, just as an aside, it doesn't have to always be a World Series. If you're like a division series clinching game or an ALCS clinching game, it's a great atmosphere to be at. It's really wonderful.
Yeah.
But Jason Giambi was on the business side of those games, so he comes to the Yankees, and you got to be thinking, if you're Jason Giambi, okay, this year we're going to get to the playoffs, and this year I'm getting out of the ALDS. And what happens? The Yankees go up against the Angels. They do win the first game, but then the Angels do a gentleman's sweep the rest of the way. And that last game, Game 4, the final score was 9-5, but it was 9-2 going into the ninth inning. So those were just 3 cosmetic runs, so it didn't so it wouldn't look so bad. Yeah. But I mean, if I'm Jason Giambi, I'm thinking, what the heck? I come to the Yankees and I still can't get out of the division series. Can you imagine that? Like, for any player.
Absolutely. And again, that was really the at least in my mind, the biggest snapshot of Giambi. He was consequential in other ways, but in my mind, in my memory, it's all about that series against Boston.
Yeah.
So as we start to wind down, there's someone else we have to mention in a very positive way, not to diminish from spotlighting Giambi, but Aaron Boone, the famous walk-off homer that actually won us that title.
I was there. I was there at the stadium. I remember when he hit it, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to the World Series. I'm going to the World Series. I was in the bleachers. I was with my friend Greg. What a moment. But you're right, because Aaron Boone hit that home run. But if it wasn't for Jason Giambi in that game, Jason Giambi hit 2 home runs, which helped the Yankees keep pace in that Game 7. Otherwise, it would have been a dominant win by the Red Sox. Another thing that the Red Sox did, of course, we all know, is that Grady Little left Pedro Martinez in the 8th inning to pitch that game when the Yankees were rallying. And really, that's like, to Yankees fans and to Red Sox fans, that is like the biggest question mark. If Grady Little had just taken Pedro out at that point and put the relievers in, I forget who their big relievers were, but they were good. They would have shut the Yankees down, and we never would have had that home run by Aaron Boone. But Jason Giambi, you're right. He kept the game at pace. It would have been 5-0. David Ortiz hit 2 home runs in that game also. He kept the Red Sox. Ahead of us. So no Jason Giambi, no Aaron Boone, and there's your history.
Right, and so just to put a button on the Boone thing, that was a historical. I mean, not only just great for obviously what it was, but he was only the second player in MLB history to end a Game 7 in the postseason with a walk-off home run. Now, I don't know if anyone has surpassed that since, but I'm going to do my homework on that. But you know what? I do enough of the other kind of stuff about Boone, so I wanted to make sure to give him a mention as well. So that's one of those highlight reels that is going to be seen until eternity and should.
Well, if we're talking about 2003, the thing is, after that was a great moment for the Yankees, but the World Series was held. I think it was held either the next night or 2 nights later. Either way, yeah, I think it was held the next night because I was so tired at Game 1 Game 7 took so much out of me. I have to admit, I really didn't care about Game 1 of the World Series. In fact, it was kind of a boring game. I think the Marlins won 5-2 or 5-3. And I remember, like, by the 7th inning, I'm sitting there, like, my hand on my shoulder, like this.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking to myself, I just want this game to end. I have no energy. And
Imagine being at a World Series game and feeling like that.
Nobody had energy. I mean, the whole stadium, like, it was morose. It was really,
wow.
That Game 7 again. It really had a hangover effect.
Sure.
Now, of course, things
best
take
possible kind.
But I think it also wore the Yankees down too, because the bats just they really went silent, including Jason Giambi. He came up in a couple big spots in that 2003 World Series, and him and Boone and Bernie Williams, they just could not get the big hit, and that really impacted them come Game 4, which went into extra innings. And the Marlins, the Marlins, they won that game. So instead of going back to Yankee Stadium up 3-1, the series was tied at that point.
Yep. And that's also telling us that we're going to have to add that to our curriculum and get into the World Series of 2003. So, but as we wind up, I just want to. First of all, I need to shout out Spencer and Ciarra for all the gold they brought to the conversation tonight, and the chat for every comment that you made, and for participating and showing up, and all of you listening afterwards.
Thank you, everybody.
It's been, the time just flies, and we probably could keep going for 2 hours more, but there's kids to get to bed and things like that. So that'll do it for us for episode 2. It's in the can. And we will be letting you know when our next one will be. You could be sure it will be on an off night, because you'd have such a struggle deciding what to watch, us or the game. We don't want to do that to you. So we'll be in touch about that, but it'll be during an off day near to come. And thank you, everybody, for joining. And remember that history matters, and we're here to tell it. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.